About 5 years ago, the family and I, we were hiking in the Friat Valley. We were heading up to Mount Boulanger, and on our second night, we were at the Headwall campground, which is just beneath the big giant head wall. And we had settled in for the night. We had finished eating dinner, our tents, our camp was set up. And right around 7 o'clock, a group of 4 university students from Edmonton showed up, and we started chatting. And I remember there was a girl wearing flip-flops because her feet had such bad blisters from her new boots, and she was struggling. And they asked me where, well, I was surprised to see them there, and they asked me where the Sidney Wallace hut was, and I told them the hut is still above the wall. And so we were chatting, and I looked at my watch and I said, no offense, I said, I'd love to chat with you, but you still got, a couple of kilometers and a big steep climb to get to the wall, to the hut. And they needed to get to the hut because they didn't bring tents. So they were committed to getting to the hut. And at that point, they were already 22 kilometers from the trailhead. So we parted ways and away they went. And then our whole family went to bed, and several hours passed, and it was pouring rain. And all of a sudden, while we're sleeping, and we had 2 tents, one for Karen and I, and one for the boys. It's the actually, I'll put a link above to that video. But while we're sleeping, all of a sudden, around 10 at night, I get awakened. And you can sense the flashlight flashing against the tent, and there's somebody saying, excuse me sir, are you awake? And I unzip, and it's those 4 kids, and they're soaking wet, and they couldn't find the wall. They got lost trying to get up there. And I'll never forget that one of the girls was crying, and she repeatedly said that, she literally said, I don't want to die. So I got up, I woke up the boys. We cut up some firewood. We got a fire going for them. We jerry-rigged a bit of a shelter, but I got a big fire going for them, and I kept telling the girl, "You're not going to die. You're going to have the most miserable night of your short life so far, but you're not going to die. You're going to sit by this fire, and you're going to be fine." And they eventually all fell asleep. We went back to sleep in our tents. They were soaking wet. They had a miserable night, but by morning when they woke up, the sun came out and they were okay. And I showed them how to get up to the Sidney Wallace tent. And boy, they were on my butt while we were climbing up. They were not going to lose sight of me. And there's more to the story, but I just want to highlight that those kids that day were not prepared to be out in that kind of a trip. They bit off more than they can chew, and they were unprepared. They didn't bring basic stuff. They didn't know how to navigate. They didn't have the right gear, and they brought too much weight. So and this is a lead into this video. I want to do a video on risk management. I think it's a topic that's near and dear to me. I've talked about it in the past, but I wanted to talk about it again. Hey folks, Martyupnorth. Hope everyone's doing well. Today I want to redo a video that I did a few years ago. About a year ago I did a video on Hiking 101, and in that video I briefly touched on the topic of managing risk while hiking. So I want to redo that today. Many of you know I'm an engineer by training, and I've spent 30 years working in oil and gas facilities. And managing risk is an integral part of what I do. Now, a risk is basically an unwanted or unplanned event or circumstance that can have adverse effects on what you're doing. So in this case, we're talking about hiking. So behind me is a grid that we use when assessing risk in engineering. But I want to show you how I can use the same grid for assessing risks while hiking. And I think once we go through this, it'll all make sense, and it'll be very interesting. What we're going to do for this quick exercise is I came up with a list of about 60 risks, and I got them all written on little sticky notes. and I will read off every one of those risks, and then I will place those risks here on this matrix. And the matrix here has two axes. So the bottom axis is the likelihood of an occurrence. So when I think of a risk, I have to think of the likelihood of an occurrence. Now I made up a scale here. I made up a scale of, is an event, at this end, it's not likely to occur. It's possible that it occur. So to give some guideline, I said it might occur every 3 years. And if something is likely to occur, it could occur every year, or you've already seen it. And then on the other axis here is the consequence. So when I think about a risk, I have to imagine whether it's no big deal if it occurs, whether it could be a problem, so we have a problem, or whether we could be in serious trouble. So this is simple, and the colors will start to make sense. Obviously, if you have a risk that's not likely to occur and is no big deal, that's not a risk that you want to manage or mitigate. And at the other extreme, if there's a risk that's likely to occur and it's likely that it's going to get you in trouble and it's in this quadrant, then that's a risk that you want to mitigate. So let's go through my list of risks and I'll post them here. So I've come up with about 30 or so risks. I'll read one out. Example of a risk is running out of food. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to position all these different risks here on this grid. And I'm going to do it quickly, sort of with what my gut instinct is or my experience is. Now, it's interesting that if you do this experiment with another friend, you might debate on where a risk lands because people have different risk tolerances and different previous experiences. So, running out of food. For me, is it likely or possible? It's actually never happened to me. So I've never run out of food. And if I did, is it no big deal? Would I have a problem? Well, if I did, I might have a problem. Poison ivy. Now, I don't hike in a part of the world that has poison ivy. That's why I brought this up, because I want to show an example of a risk that would have a different place on the register for different people. So for me, the risk of poison ivy is actually not very likely. And again, if it occurred, would I be in trouble or is it just a problem? I'm going to put it somewhere there. Enduring 24 hours of rain. Well, I'll tell you what, it's going to happen. I've had many times where I've had 24 hours of rain and everything gets soaking wet. Am I in trouble if I have 24 hours of rain? No. But do I have a problem? In fact, I'm going to say, for me, it's somewhere around here. It's somewhere around between being not a big deal and being a big deal. Insect bite, bitten by a fly. For me, it's going to happen. I guarantee it's going to happen every year. But for me, it's no big deal. I get bitten by flies all the time. They don't bug me. 2 inches of snow. Here's an interesting one. So right now I'm assuming I'm doing this exercise for summer months. But in the mountains, could I encounter 2 inches of snow? It's actually possible. It does happen about every couple of years while I'm hiking. Actually, 2 is not very much. So it's somewhere between between very likely and somewhat likely. And would I have a problem with 2 inches of snow? I could lose the trail, or it could cause me some problems. It could be cold. So I'm going to leave it more. Losing all your fuel. I've never lost all my fuel. It could happen, but if it did happen to me, it's no big deal. Could I have an encounter with a porcupine? That's one, I've said on many videos, porcupines are my nemesis, so it is very likely to occur, and it's actually going to cause me, it's caused me problems. Porcupines have caused me problems, so I'm going to put it there. Temperature climbs above 35 degrees. It's not likely, and if it was, it might be a problem, but not a huge problem. Losing my bear spray. Now this is an interesting one because in risk management we have the concept of double jeopardy. So if one of the ways that I mitigate a risk is by bringing something like a bear spray, I have to make the assumption that I will not lose my bear spray. What I mean by that is I'm not going to bring the bear spray and then make the assumption I lose a bear spray and bring a second bear spray, because you'll do that indefinitely. So losing a bear spray for this exercise today is actually not a risk that I will consider. Now, a snake bite is a very interesting one because for me, let's say let's say we're hiking somewhere in the desert. So I want to use this one just as an example. I'm going to say that it is likely, it could happen, but I'm going to say that the consequences of being bitten by a snake are very critical. So that's why I wanted to put it there. Some interesting ones here. Not enough sleep, likely to happen. For me, it's not a big deal. Running out of water is actually not likely. It's actually never happened to me, or very, very rarely. But if it did happen, if I ran out of water, I would be in trouble. If I burned by a flame or hot liquid, again, something that's happened to me very rarely. And is it no big deal? No, it's a big deal. And in fact, you could get an infection or whatever, so it's somewhere there. Temperature drops below freezing, similar to getting caught with snow. If I'm hiking in the summer, the odds of it happening are actually high. They're somewhere in here. And am I in trouble? I'm not in trouble, but it's a big problem. Temperature drops by 10 degrees Celsius. That's absolutely going to happen. And do I have a problem? I'm going to say it's not a big deal. I'm going to put it there. Keep going. Thanks for bearing with me. All right, getting a headache. I get headaches all the time. It's guaranteed that it's going to happen, but for me, it's not a big deal. It's somewhere up there. Falling off a cliff is unlikely. I've never fallen off a cliff. If I did, it would be problematic. I wanted to try and find something for that quadrant. You'll realize when we're done here that there's going to be very few things in this quadrant and in this quadrant. But being captured by Amazon women, it's very unlikely. But in the scale of consequences, for me, it'd be pretty low. I wouldn't care if I got captured by Amazon. Losing my hat is something that's possible, happens once in a while, but it's so, again, I don't care if so losing my hat has about the same consequences as being captured by Amazon women, but it's a little more likely to happen. A minor equipment failure, like a hole in the boot, is possible that it'll happen, and it can be a problem depending on the equipment failure. Major equipment failure, like a broken tent pole. Again, it's not likely, or it's somewhere in there for me. I've never broken a tent pole. If I did, am I in deep trouble, or am I just having a problem? I'm having a problem. Eating bad food. Oh, interesting one. Food poisoning kind of thing. So again, likelihood of occurrence somewhere there, but you know what? Probably a little more problematic than it's not just a problem. I could be in trouble. Attacked by a cougar. Very interesting one. Absolutely very unlikely. I've never heard of one occurring, but if you got attacked by a cougar, you'd be in deep trouble. So I'm going to put it as far away on the likelihood, but I'm going to put it up there. Getting blisters, I get them all the time. For me, they're not a big deal. So I'm going to put it somewhere there. Getting sunburned, it happens once in a while in Alberta, but again, for me, it's a minor problem. Running out of daylight, because I'm assuming we're hiking in the summer, it's almost not going to happen. And if it does, it depends on whether I'm hiking or if I'm in camp or whatever. So the consequences of running out of daylight might be I'm in a bit of trouble. Almost there. All right, attacked by humans, again, not likely. It's never happened. Actually, the consequences are less problematic than being attacked by a cougar, I think. Losing your food, having your food stolen by an animal, losing it because you lost your pack, likelihood is very low. It will cause a problem, but it's not life-threatening, not as bad as losing water. Falling in a river happens, and by that I mean you might slip while you're crossing. Are you in trouble? Is it no big deal? No, it's always a big deal. Do we have a problem? Are you in trouble? I'm going to put it somewhere around here. This is one I worry about a lot. Just tripping and falling and hurt and twisting a leg or something like that. That's likely to occur, and it's going to be a problem. It can be quite severe. You can fall and you can hurt yourself and not be able to get out. So getting lost for me is not likely. Now, if I got completely lost, I might have a problem. But the reason I say it's not likely is because my solution to being lost is to return. I don't understand. I actually don't understand how people get lost. Insect bites by a wasp. I wanted to put one. So this is another one that's likely to occur. And if you have an allergic, if you know you're allergic to that, and it could cause a shock or a hard breathing problem, I'm going to put it there. So insect bites. Attacked by a black bear. Unlike the cougar, similar to the cougar, you're going to be in trouble, and it's a little bit more likely. So I'm going to put it there. And then drinking contaminated water. In my experience, it is it's almost unlikely, but if it did occur, I'd have a problem. It's a manageable problem because if you get beaver fever, it manifests itself in a couple of days. Now, so I'm going to replicate all this, and I'm going to build it as a nice screenshot, and you'll have it as a screenshot. But what does this tell me now that I've done this exercise? And so again, I've done this exercise based on my risk tolerance, based on my experiences, based on where I hike, and based on a summer hike. You can do the same thing, do it with a friend, have fun doing this with a friend. I'll even publish the list of some of these hazards. If you can think of different hazards, please mention them in the comments. I mean, I really want to encourage comments on this one. But so what does this tell me? Well, what this tells me is that now you see the color coding. So my basic philosophy on the color coding is that these ones in green don't require a lot of mitigation because they're not likely to happen, and if they do, the consequences are minor. In fact, there's almost no mitigation necessary here. These ones here, if something is likely to occur and it can get you in deep trouble, this requires mitigation. And then these ones require a little bit less mitigation, and then these ones is probably, that's the bulk of the stuff. Now, when I talk about mitigation is measures to lower the risk. So there's two things you can do. One is you can try and prevent the risk, or you can have stuff to deal with the risk after the fact. So, and what this helps you do is you got to remember, well, you know this, if you're watching this channel and you're hiking or you want to get into hiking, you're carrying gear on your back and you can't possibly mitigate every risk. You can't bring everything that you need. So the question is, based on this analysis, what are some of the smart things to do? So I hope the previous exercise made sense and that you enjoyed it, and I definitely encourage you to do something like that at home. So now in the next 5 slides, I'm just going to discuss the results of that analysis and what it tells me in my example. So first of all, on this slide, I want to talk about there are standard risk mitigating things that you should always do before any trip, and I've listed them here, and in no particular order, but you should be familiar with the equipment you're going to use. Never go out there using brand new equipment. So if you buy brand new equipment, try it at home first and familiarize yourself with it. For sure, you should always file an itinerary with family, friends, or park services. And in that itinerary, tell people where you're going to go, when you're going to go, when you're going to come out, and importantly, tell them, how many days or how many hours after your return date should they go looking for you should you not reappear. I always tell my wife, wait at least a whole day. So if I'm scheduled to come out on Sunday and I don't come home on Sunday night, wait until Monday evening before you call anyone. So hike with partners if at all possible. Common sense. In fact, in some areas it's mandatory. Even here in Banff, there's areas where there's so many grizzlies that you are not allowed to go hiking solo. I like hiking solo myself, but I also like hiking with partners. Hike on defined trails that are well marked. Avoid bushwhacking. Bushwhacking is especially important thing not to do when you've listed an itinerary. So if I've told somebody where I'm going to be, but I decide to suddenly do a lot of bushwhacking, they might not know where to look for me. So avoid bushwhacking. Stay fit, know your limits. Definitely educate yourself. Take courses if necessary. Watch my videos, watch other people's videos. Bring a map and bring a couple of basic tools, a pocket knife, a lighter. Those are basic tools. So these are standard mitigations that you should do for every trip. Now, the second slide are the risks that ended up in the red zone. So these are likely events, have a high probability of occurring, and they do have major consequences. So in the example I use here, it was snake bites and bee stings. And so if I was legitimately going hiking in a desert area where these things were risks, I would bring, I said wear leather boots or something appropriate, and I would bring a first aid kit, and I would update my first aid kit. So I might add some anti-venom or an EpiPen if I'm allergic, or Benadryl in case I get bitten. It can relieve quite a bit. And then I mentioned here a communications device. So if something's going to be very critical and you're in an area where you need to be evacuated because it's dangerous, a device like a mobile phone, if it works in your area, or an InReach is something to consider. In fact, that's a real example. I met a gentleman not too long ago who attempted doing the North Boundary Trail. He got stung by a bee, and his situation got so bad that he actually hit the SOS button and had to be evacuated. On this slide, we get into the orange risks. So these are the ones that are less likely to happen, but if they do, they still have minor to major consequences. So they should be addressed if weight is not a constraint. So in this example, being attacked by a black bear, porcupine. So I listed those hazards there. You can read them. So how do I further mitigate in this case? Well, carrying a bear spray. So bear spray is, and make sure you know how to use your bear spray and you're wearing it readily accessible. Again, footwear comes up a lot of times for me. That's why I wear full leather boots. It's because of where I'm hiking and my fear of twisting an ankle is real for me. A walking stick is a nice way to reduce some of the risks when you're walking because it improves your balance. And then I mentioned your first aid kit. So upgrading your first aid kit with things like athletic tape or maybe an emergency blanket, and then season appropriate clothing and sleeping gear to address some of the risks you identified. So we hike in the mountains, so a little bit warmer clothing is appropriate. And down there, I put a sentence that I've repeated many, many times. Never step on something if you can go over, and never go over if you can walk around. So that applies to stepping over logs. I've seen people try to step over a log and twist an ankle while doing it, or jumping over a creek when they can find a way around, or stepping on a slippery rock. So those are all things. So it's always in my mind. I actually have a comfortable fear of tripping and twisting an ankle. And now we get to the yellow risks, the ones that I call likely but not serious, or serious but not likely. And in fact, when you look at these risks and the things necessary to mitigate these risks, you've already brought those things along in many instances. But there are additional mitigating things you can do. So if I look at the list, and it's right there in front of you. Additional things is in your first aid kit. Now you see the value of bringing perhaps moleskin and pain medication and water purification tablets. And then this is the first time where I talk about a small repair kit. I'm not talking about a major repair kit. You'll seldom need a major repair kit, but in a small repair kit, bring a little bit of wire, bring a couple of zip ties, some 2mm rope, a little tube, a little aluminum or copper tube to help repair tent poles, and you'll get away with a lot of repairs. And this is the first time I mentioned perhaps in my case a small LED flashlight. It's not entirely necessary, but if you can carry the weight, a small LED flashlight will help you. And then I mentioned a bear bag here and some rope to address the possibility of animals stealing your food. And I want to emphasize, a bear bag is not a preventative measure. It's just, it's not going to stop a bear from coming in, but it's a remedy if they do come in. So I just wanted to show you my approach to how I pack and the gear I bring, and help. This is a fun exercise to do it yourself, and then after you've done this exercise, look back on some of the gear you've brought, and you might reconsider some of the gear that you bring or not. Now, one big way to mitigate all these risks is to travel. Well, talking about them is a good thing. Knowing about them is a really good thing. Traveling with friends and helping each other out, that's the other thing. I mean, when you do this as a team, you'll realize when you hike with two people, if you forget something, the odds of somebody else having it are pretty good. But this is definitely an important exercise to do when you are by yourself. So hope you enjoyed this quick overview of how I approach risk management. By all means, please provide some comments, provide some feedback. Let's get a discussion going on this. Maybe you want to do your own risk matrix. I'd be happy to see how other people evaluate their risks. So Martyupnorth saying definitely do not be scared to go out in the bush, in the wilderness, on the trail, even by yourself. It's a wonderful sport. The hazards can be and the risks can be managed. You're not going to die while hiking, and get off the beaten